Hi, my name is Tian Yu Shea. I'm a fourth year medical student at the New York Institute of Technology, and you're listening to Do or Do Not. Today on Do or Do Not, we venture slightly off the path to try and help medical students applying for residencies in the new postgraduate education system. To give some historical background, in the past there were separate residency programs sponsored by the American Osteopathic Association and the American College of Graduate Medical Education. Graduates of osteopathic medical school could apply for either programs. In 2018, the ACGME and AOA merged, allowing one residency pathway for both MDs and DOs. According to the ACGME, the reasons for the merger were to provide high-quality, uniform graduate medical education accreditation, eliminate the need for programs to choose a pathway, reduce costs and increase efficiencies, provide consistency, preserve and protect osteopathic medical education, and increase opportunities of osteopathic graduate medical education and recognition. Although this merger was meant to simplify the application process and is an exciting step for equality of the osteopathic profession, for DO student applicants it leaves many new questions. To prepare for this episode, the staff of the Do or Do Not team surveyed DO students to determine what the most common questions were regarding applications to residency and the merger. We decided to split the episode into two parts, interviewing a program director from a program which was previously AOA certified and program director from a historically allopathic residency. In the first part to this episode, we interviewed Dr. Cindy Hoffman. Dr. Hoffman is a DO and the program director of the Dermatology residency program at St. Barnabas Hospital, one of the busiest hospitals in New York City. The program is affiliated with both Mount Sinai School of Medicine and Albert Einstein College of Medicine. In part 2, we will speak with Dr. Kyle Katona. Dr. Katona is an MD and the Associate Program Director for the Zucker School of Medicine at Hofstra Northwell Residency Program in Internal Medicine at Northwell Health University. The residency is a university-based program supported by one of the largest healthcare systems in the United States, Northwell Health. It is situated on the border between Queens and Nassau County on Long Island, New York, and cares for a diverse group of patients. Both program directors will provide insight into the application process to their program and will give tips on obtaining residency interviews and improving applications. We know that these interviews will help you in your process. We hope you enjoy these interviews. Dr. Hoffman, thank you again so much for joining us and lending us your time for the second portion where we want to ask questions about the residency.
Of course, you're welcome.
I guess to start off, can you tell us about the residency that you run and your current role?
Yes, I am the program director at St. Barnabas Hospital's Dermatology residency and currently have 3 residents. And my residents work in my office a couple of days a week. They also work at the hospital clinics a couple of days a week. They have a half day of surgery. They have a half day of dermatopathology where they review slides of their patients, where we do biopsies of patients, and then we have slides that they review. And they do academics. That fulfills their week of the program.
Very cool. Dermatology is a highly prestigious and valued field. The main part of a student's application involves the medical school grades, the board scores, letters of recommendation. Which do you think is most important when trying to screen candidates for an interview? And what do you look for in an applicant?
So I do look at their transcripts. I do look at the board scores. I do look at letters of recommendation. I also look at how motivated they are. Have they rotated in other programs? How many programs have they rotated in? I also look at their interpersonal skills when they do a rotation. I also look at how much research they've done and if they've published any articles. So we look at a lot of different factors, and it's not only their board scores and their transcripts. We look at everything. And I can't tell you one is better than the other. We look at each of them equally.
Like I said before, dermatology is one of those really valued fields and really competitive, one of the most competitive. Do you have any advice for students that might have scored lower on their USMLE or COMLEX, but are trying to bypass maybe a screen or a filter and still love dermatology and want to do that?
Yes. And just so you know, I have taken students in the past that have not done so great on their boards. What they need to do is they need to do a year. If they don't get in the first time, they need to do a year of research. And if they don't get in the second time, they do need to do another year of research. There are different research positions. Some are in dermoscopy, some are bench research, and there's different research positions around the country. And if somebody does a couple of years of research and then they apply to my program, even though they might have low board scores, I'm going to take them because their 2 years of research makes them really good candidates, even though their board scores may be low. Just because your board scores are low doesn't necessarily mean you're not going to be a good doctor. As a matter of fact, I found that candidates who have lower board scores sometimes really have to work harder and are more motivated to work harder than other candidates. And I have taken candidates with low board scores.
Wow, super cool. In terms of letters of recommendation, is there an optimal letter? Which type of letter do you think is best? Is it better to have a letter from someone famous or well known in the field that might be mediocre, or maybe a letter that's really personal from someone that you know?
Well, I do look at letters from another dermatologist that I know where a student has rotated with them. For instance, another program director. I do like letters from them because I know who they are. So I know that they're really evaluating the candidate. So I would prefer for a candidate to get a letter from somebody that I know or somebody who is very well known in the profession.
So I know that it happened recently and only time will tell how this will pan out. But last year, the AOA and ACGME residencies merged into one. Will this make the process for DO applicants into a field like dermatology more difficult to get into?
I think so. It was really difficult for DO candidates to get into allopathic programs to begin with. And now they're competing with MD candidates to get into DO programs. So it's going to be more difficult for DOs in general. Now, my program has osteopathic recognition, which means that if an MD candidate wants to apply to my program, they have to take a certain number of hours in osteopathic medicine to apply to my program, whereas DOs already have those hours of osteopathic medicine. So it might be a little bit easier where they're not competing against other MD candidates.
Wow. I think that makes perfect sense. I think that's great. Let's say there is an MD applicant who does want to get into your program. How would you then compare their scores versus COMLEX scores or their applications in general, as a DO student might not take the USMLE?
I look at the COMLEX and the USMLE in the same way. I look at the percentage of how they did amongst their peers. So I don't take one over the other.
I just wanted to ask if there was maybe a disadvantage if a DO student did not take the USMLE, because I know it's common for DO students to take both board exams now.
Yes, it wouldn't make a difference in my program. I don't make any distinction.
There are also two types of physical exam tests. The USMLE gives the CS, the clinical skills, and the osteopathic gives the COMLEX physical exam. I'm guessing that this applies also with the same philosophy?
Correct. To me, it doesn't matter. I go by the percentage of how the candidate did amongst their peers of the test that they took.
Great. I wanted to move on to the personal statement. Can this make or break their application?
Well, it could, depending on what they say, but I do like to see somebody being a little creative. I do like to learn about the person in the personal statement. But of course, they would have to have a really bad personal statement for me not to accept that. If everything else they did, if they had great board scores or a great transcript or great letters of recommendation, they would have to have a really poor personal statement for me not to accept them because of the personal statement.
Is there anything that you specifically look for?
I kind of leave it up to the candidate. Most of the candidates tell me about their past, why they wanted to get into dermatology. And that's what I like to see. I like to see why they want to be a dermatologist. But I've also had candidates tell other stories.
I wanted to talk about this year's application specifically. I know there's a lot of fourth years that like to listen, and also it would help me a lot too.
Okay. Okay.
This year, due to COVID, a lot of students are unable to rote at hospitals and these audition rotations. Do you have any advice for students who want to come to your program and want to stand out?
This year is very difficult. I will tell you that. I did survey some of my other program director friends to see what they're doing. Some of them are accepting students, some of them are not accepting students. I felt really bad for these students because it's really a difficult time. And I will tell you that it does make a difference if you're rotating in a program because I'm able to see, if you're rotating with me, I'm able to see how you are with the other residents, your interpersonal skills, how you are with patients. So it does make it very difficult when you're applying and maybe your board scores aren't so great, but let's say you have a great personality and you fit in great in the program, I might be more willing to take you. And there is a disadvantage this year. So we are offering the students, and we are doing this, we're doing virtual rotations. And the virtual rotations means that if we're doing academics, we could do it virtually with you. We are doing some telemedicine, so they're able to rotate doing the telemedicine. And there is one day a week that the residents are actually going into clinic in the hospital where we are allowing students from New York to go into the hospital with the residents. Unfortunately, there are states that are on the governor's travel advisory list where you have to quarantine for 2 weeks. And we are not allowing those students to actually come and rotate, but we are allowing them to do virtual rotations with us. And so we do have a few students doing that.
I think that's a great solution. That's super cool. Do you think that there will be more or less applications this year due to the fact that students don't need to consider the financial issues of travel during the application process? And if there is increased volume, how does the program adapt to decide who to interview?
So there probably will be an increased number of applications. I would prefer to narrow my application pool list to those students that have an interest in coming to my program and coming to New York. So we really look at the candidates who have rotated with us, and then we go beyond that, a couple of other candidates as well. So even if there are more applications, I would probably narrow the list down to those who have rotated with us because I know that those who have rotated with us are very interested in coming to our program.
Do you have any tips for students doing virtual interviews this year? Can you advise on anything like dress, background, important questions that should be asked during the interview, things like that?
Of course, always dress professionally, even though it's a virtual. The virtual is going to be the same as the in person as far as the questions go. I prefer not to tell you what the questions are because then other people are going to know what I'm asking during these interviews. But of course, I mean, the usual type of questions that you would be asked on an interview, it's going to be the same, whether it's virtual or in person.
Do you think that there are any questions that the students should ask to programs this year because they can't see it in person?
Of course, ask what the program is like because they don't really know what the program is like because they're not actually rotating at the program. They probably would want to know if the program is more academic versus more cosmetic. The program in New York, all the dermatology programs in New York, osteopathic or allopathic, have more of academic. They're more academic, they're more research oriented, there is more pathology. Whereas possibly the programs in Florida are more surgically oriented because they have tons of skin cancers down there. So those are the kind of questions that you want to ask about.
So this is our final question, Dr. Hoffman, and we already have a little bit of your thoughts on it. So I'm not sure if it matters to you too much, but I want to pick your brain a little bit. So the USMLE recently announced their change of step one pass fail. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Okay, so it's not going to matter that much to me because we look at other things like their transcript, what research they've done, and publications that they've done. And if they've rotated with us, their interpersonal skills and motivation. So it wouldn't matter as much to me as it might to other programs. I don't think that looking at board scores makes or breaks a doctor. I think that, some candidates do poorly on their boards, but they're amazing physicians. So to me, board scores were never the only thing that I review or the most important thing that I review.
Dr. Hoffman, thank you again so much for your time.
Okay, thank you.
In part two, we will speak with Dr. Kyle Katona. Dr. Katona, thank you so much for joining us. I know you're very busy.
Oh, you're welcome.
One of our missions at Do or Do Not is to help osteopathic medical students with the application process to residency. So we really appreciate your time today. I'm a fourth year student at NYIT, and I appreciate you answering these questions not only for the viewers, but also for me.
Oh, of
So,
course. Happy to help.
so thank you again. And I guess, can you start with telling us about the residency at Northwell and your current role?
Sure. I am an associate program director for the, let's see, it's going to, drum roll please, it's a really long name, the Zucker School of Medicine at Hofstra Northwell Internal Medicine Residency Program at North Shore LIJ. I think
Wow.
I got it right. Okay. Yeah, it changes every year. We add some more names and somebody donates some money, so we got to change the name up a little bit. But I'm an associate program director there. I've been there in that role, or been here in that role, probably for about 10 years or so. I'm a practicing hospitalist, and I actually did my residency program at North Shore University Hospital when it was two separate programs, North Shore and LIJ.
Do you think the residency has changed at all since your time?
Oh, definitely. Probably the biggest change was the merger with LIJ and then the affiliation with the Zucker School of Medicine, School of Medicine at Hofstra. Probably the biggest change that we've had.
Can you tell us a little bit about the residency?
Sure. It's one of the largest IM residency programs in the country, about 130 residents all told. That number fluctuates a little bit throughout the year, but we have our two main campuses at North Shore University Hospital and Long Island Jewish Medical Center. We use a 4+1 kind of rotation schedule. So every fifth week, you have a week dedicated to outpatient medicine in between all the rotations that you have on the wards and in the ICUs and night float. We're academic affiliated with the Hofstra School of Medicine, what we like to consider an up-and-coming academic institution, really one of the more innovative residency programs in the country.
Can you describe the difference between a community and an academic program?
Sure. A academic program is one that's directly affiliated with a medical school or university. A community program might have some loose affiliations with a university. A main affiliation. There's not every medical school has its main kind of clinical teaching site, and we are the main clinical teaching site for Hofstra, and so that's what constitutes an academic program, and also one that is focused on research, whether it's clinical research, quality, medical education research.
Are there pros and cons to both types? When should a student choose one over the other?
It really depends on what you're looking for. If people want to go into academic medicine, first of all, I think you can get a good clinical experience, whether it's an academic site or a community affiliated residency program. It all depends on what you want moving forward, because most places, most residency programs, academic and community, are going to look to kind of keep their own residents. Every residency program puts a lot of effort into recruitment, so not only do they want to keep those residents for the residency, but also they want to use them to kind of hold on to, whether it's for faculty at an academic institution or for their own faculty at community hospitals.
Being a fourth year, I've done a lot of research for myself as well. Are there benefits to possibly getting more fellowships at an academic center than maybe at a community center?
Well, I think the benefits of training somewhere where there are more fellowships are, one, you have those faculty, you have those fellows to learn from. And the more fellowships you have, the better the teaching, the resources that you have, the better that you're going to be able to hold on to these patients when you get them and not just necessarily transfer them to other institutions. And if you're interested, again, in going on to a fellowship, which the majority of internal medicine candidates do, most places are going to take their own for fellowships. So it gives you kind of a leg up in the fellowship application process.
That's a great explanation. And are there a lot of fellowships available at LIJ?
Yeah, I feel like it increases every year, but all the major subspecialties, in addition to new fellowships that are propping up within each subspecialty. For example, cardiology has EP fellowship, interventional fellowship. Everything keeps expanding. I feel like medicine is just becoming more and more subspecialized the farther out we go.
Thank you. I wanted to move on to the application part of the process. So the main part of the application are grades, board scores, and letters of recommendation. Which do you think is the most important when trying to screen candidates for an interview?
Well, it's a tough question because when you're screening candidates, a lot of times that's almost an automated process. So it's hard to use letters of recommendation because when you first have the whole applicant pool, we have to try to sift through everything, and we can't do that by reading through everyone's application. So we need to look at something that you can almost, throw down on a spreadsheet or sort with the tools that the application website gives us, Eris. So I think for the initial kind of screening process, medical school grades and board scores are probably the most important. And letters of recommendation play a role later on once you've kind of decided who to interview, at least from our perspective. We interview about 500 candidates a year. So we really need some kind of automated sorting process. We just don't have the time to kind of sort through by hand, if you will, all the applications. Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense. What about after the screening process? Do the different categories have different weights on them, or would you say that you look at them all equally?
No, I think the different categories certainly have different weights. Medical school grades probably a little bit higher weight than board scores, but both are pretty high up there. Letters of recommendation, we use a weighted scoring system when we consider all the applications, with everything on the application and also incorporating the interview itself. The letters of recommendation, we don't necessarily score per se. And a lot of reasons for that. One, as you kind of go through this, they tend to be very similar, all the letters of recommendation. After all, they're all glowingly positive of all you guys, so they do their job, but there's not a lot there to help discern everybody. Me personally, I think it's a little unfair to put a lot of stake into a letter written by someone that you don't even know as an applicant. Not that you don't know the person, but you don't know what's in the letter. You don't know if the person's a good letter writer or not. You're just hoping someone can kind of speak on your behalf. We kind of use the letters of recommendation as a way to kind of further look into certain applicants. For example, say if there's a red flag somewhere in the application, does the letter of recommendation address that in any way, or does it help overcome whatever that red flag might be, if that makes sense?
That does. In the same breath, do you look at the dean's letter similarly?
We do. Recently, the dean's letters have become a little bit more standardized. The biggest parts of the dean's letters that I kind of really try to scour through are whether or not anyone had to take any repeat courses or was there any kind of professionalism issues. And then, of course, the summaries probably get into the medical student performance evaluation, the MSP. But the dean's letter overall, first of all, a lot of them are ghostwritten by people other than the dean. You almost know what they're going to say beforehand. So
I understand. Last question regarding the letters. Do you think that a famous doctor or a doctor from the institution that the applicant is applying to is more valuable?
not necessarily. If somebody wrote you a letter, say at Northwell, if someone from Northwell wrote an applicant a letter and I had some questions about the individual, I would call up that person and say, hey, you worked with so-and-so. Tell me a little bit more about him or her. So just having the letter itself doesn't necessarily give you a leg up. As far as having a letter from a famous doctor per se, for me, if I'm looking through an application, I'd rather read letters of people who worked with you closely. It doesn't necessarily have to be somebody famous.
I wanted to move on to more osteopathic oriented questions for our
Sure.
osteopathic viewer base. So, if a DO student has not taken the USMLE, do you find it hard to compare them to allopathic students?
We're assuming they've taken the Comlex.
Yes, only the Comlex and not the USMLE.
Yeah, that's it's not an issue if they haven't taken the USMLE. There are online calculators that you can help compare apples to oranges, so that's not necessarily a deal breaker.
So, you don't think that it would be a disadvantage if a student didn't take the USMLE?
No, when we weigh those factors, if a DO student hasn't taken the USMLE, it's just a matter of, oh, they took the Comlex, so we'll just convert the score over. That's all. I'm also speaking for my program. I don't know if other programs, if that's an automatic kind of deal breaker, but these tests are expensive enough.
Definitely. So, there's also the CS, and for the DO students, there's the PE, step 2 CS and the level 2 PE. And do you guys view that similarly as well?
We do, yeah. Same thing as the steps 1 and 2 in the first parts of the USMLE. We can kind of convert them over.
Among the medical students, there's this idea that USMLE and COMLEX scores are king, right? They make up most of your application, and if you don't have good scores, you can't do anything that you want to do. Now that you've addressed that and you say that you look at the application a little more holistically, but you still have to use ways to minimize the amount of applications that you look at, how would someone stand out if they have low board scores?
Well, we look at the application holistically after we've selected people to interview. That's when we can kind of break down the dean's letter, the personal statement, how they did on their third year rotations. Standing out beforehand is tough because, again, the thousands of applications we get, no one's really going through any of these, individual letters prior to inviting someone for an interview. If we have certain set cutoffs for USMLE scores per se and things that trigger a red flag on our error search where we wouldn't necessarily invite someone to interview, but if someone's on the border, then there are a few candidates where we can kind of dive in and determine whether or not to offer that person an interview. And that's where other experiences such as research and even just addressing the potential red flags that might be there. If someone didn't do well on a standardized test, whether it's the USMLE and Comlex, use all the parts of the application to address why. You don't necessarily want to run from it. I know we'll probably talk about the personal statement in a little bit, but that's a great venue to kind of explain what happened on the USMLE. Why did you have to take it twice? Because you're not going to be able to hide from it, right? It's right there in your application, so you might as well address it. When it's not addressed, that's like a red flag in itself.
That's a perfect segue, Dr. Katona. So, when reading a candidate's personal statement, I just want to know your thoughts on this, and can this make or break their application? If it's really good or maybe if it's really bad.
I think overall people sweat the personal statement way too much. I don't think it's going to make anyone's application. And if you have a spell checker and look it over a couple times, it's not going to break anyone's application. Most of them are pretty similar. Granted, I'm a little jaded. I've been doing this for a while and I probably read hundreds of them a year. So I think it's a good opportunity to explain any kind of deficiencies that are in the application. Again, like you can explain away, this is why I had to repeat this course. This is why my board scores weren't where I think they should be. I think in general, it's just an opportunity for the most, why are you going into this field? And they generally have a very similar kind of flow to them. I think all of us probably went into this field for very similar reasons. So most of the candidates talk about whether it was a relative or experience that they had in the world of medicine that kind of drove them to that. They'll talk about how their personal hobbies kind of relate to the field of medicine and probably for other subspecialties as well. But I don't think it's anything that can kind of make or break your application. It's very rare that I've seen a personal statement kind of break someone's application. And that was someone who, for whatever reason, did not glance at it again after they wrote it down on what seemed like a cocktail napkin.
I wanted to move on to talking about this year's applications. I know there's a lot of fourth years listening. So, this year, due to COVID, it's been really difficult for a lot of students to rotate at the hospitals that they want to go to. Do you have any advice for students who want to come to your program and that would have maybe stood out with a audition rotation but couldn't?
You're not alone. No one's doing it away rotations, and certainly not in the New York area. What I would say is having an away rotation, while it allows us to get a more kind of honest assessment of how you are, because it's hard to figure out to get a perfect snapshot of what someone's going to be like as a resident just from their application. If you've actually worked with them, you get a better idea. Even when away rotations were allowed, we didn't necessarily hold it against somebody if they couldn't do a rotation here, because a lot of times it's up to chance whether or not you're able to get it. It's not a sure thing. We understand that people are interested in a lot of different programs and they only have so much time to do an away rotation. We're not going to feel insulted if you didn't do a rotation with us. So when we grade out an applicant, whether or not they did a rotation here is not part of the process. It allows us to clarify some things if you were with us, and we could kind of talk to residents that you worked with and faculty that you worked with, but it's not part of any kind of standardized grade.
On that same note, due to COVID, a lot of students don't need to consider the financial need for travel this year. So it's probably going to equate to an increase in applications sent out per student. How is LIJ going to compensate for the increased volume of applications?
It remains to be seen, right? We haven't even gotten the load of applications hasn't even come in yet. I think because everything is virtual, if we need to interview more people because we have so many more applications, I think the virtual nature of interviews allows us to do a little bit more, although that has all of its own hiccups and we don't even know what those are going to be yet. But right now, I'm not sure if it's going to necessarily be a bigger burden for us. We interview 500 candidates a year, so it's hard for us to do more than that. We'll see what happens when the applications start rolling in. I think we have a little leeway with the way they're going to be set up.
Do you think it'll make it more difficult to decide who and how to interview?
Oh, the how is definitely going to be more difficult. We're already hitting some roadblocks with fellowship programs in our institution, just in terms of the logistics of using whatever platform. Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily going to change who we interview. That the hows are going to be tough. And to be honest, I think from our perspective, when we're looking at the candidates, I always kind of view the interview day as like one of the first things I'll tell a candidate when I sit down and interview with them is essentially, don't sweat this. You're here to view us. If we didn't think you were a good candidate, we wouldn't have asked you to come. So this is your opportunity to find out more about us. We know that you're coming here, putting your best foot forward and showing us who you are, but most of that's already on paper. We kind of have a good idea of who you are. And so even with virtual interviews, we'll still have that. We have everything on paper. I think it's a lot tougher for the applicants because they're not seeing the program. Every program, whether it's based on their website or whatever information you can gather from it, it's really hard to get a vibe of the program and how the residents enjoy their time there without being there. And so that's going to be tough to transmit virtually. So I feel, not that all the listeners are going to want to hear this, but I think it's going to be harder for the student.
We appreciate that as a fourth year. That sentiment means a lot to us. This year is very different than anything we've read about or definitely experienced. So I know you said that the interview is for the student to know the program more, but a lot of students, they'll still definitely think that it's important and it's for the program to see them. So do you have any tips for students doing these virtual interviews this year?
As with everything, practice going on Zoom chats with your friends, check your backgrounds, what you're wearing. With our residents, they're preparing and currently undergoing fellowship interviews right now. So we have little practice interviews with them. And there was one resident who was doing a practice interview, was sitting in a dark chair with a very high back, dark suit, and essentially just looked like a floating head because everything you couldn't really make out anything. Make sure the backgrounds there's nothing inappropriate. Bland is okay. Make sure the lighting's okay. Kind of practice that awkward give and take that you have online where It always seems like people are talking at the same time and you don't know whether you should go first and the other person should go first. Just try to develop that cadence. And keep in mind too, with all the programs, we're learning a new way to do this too. We're going to have faculty development sessions where we're going to teach all the faculty how to use Zoom. I'm sure there's going to be tons of times where the service crashes and breaks down, or some of our faculty don't know how to use it. They're going to mess something up. So practice everything on your end so everything is as smooth as can be just from the technical standpoint. And I'm sure kind of everyone is doing that. You guys are all probably much more tech savvy than a lot of us. Just have patience with the whole process because there's going to be a lot of bumps in the road.
And Dr. Katona, do you recommend wearing pants below the suit or just underwear?
Nah, no pants. Come on, live a little.
Thank you for your time, Dr. Katona. I just have one more question. And
Sure.
I know that this hasn't happened yet, but USMLE recently announced for step 1 that it's going to become pass-fail. So do you think that it's going to make it more difficult to evaluate residency candidates, and specifically for osteopathic students who wish to distinguish themselves?
Unfortunately, I think it does. I think it really hurts some of the students, especially for some of the osteopathic students. If they do take the USMLE, they can kind of show, hey, I'm on par with other candidates, and this is my way for my application to stand out. Because again, like I was saying, when you first select people to interview, it's these objective measures that these schools are kind of sorting through. And when everyone just becomes, a P for pass, and there's no scale of how they did it, it is hard for them to stand out. I understand the reasons for doing it. It makes sense from the medical school perspective, because I think too many students were putting too much emphasis on taking a test and doing well on the test rather than their actual courses. But I think not a lot of input from graduate medical education was obtained before they decided to go forward with it.
Do you think that that weight is going to shift towards another category?
Well, everyone's talking about it going to step 2, which it might, but then step 2 is just going to become pass-fail at some point. So from my perspective, the weight might go a little bit more towards your third-year clerkship grades and then step 2. But I don't think people are going to put a lot of emphasis towards step 2 right off the bat, because I think that'll eventually turn to pass-fail as well.
I understand. Thank you so much for your insight, Dr. Katona. I know you're a very busy person. I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to come talk with us today.
Hey, not a problem.
This concludes our episode of Do or Do Not. Send all inquiries, comments, suggestions, and even let us know if there's someone you want us to interview to doordonotpodcast@gmail.com. Don't forget to like us on Facebook at Do or Do Not Podcast for updates. If you enjoyed our podcast, please share it with your classmates and administration. We have plenty of more interviews lined up, and we're excited to share them with you. This is Tian Yu Shea. Thank you guys so much for listening to Do or Do Not.